So today I'm out and about sharing my thoughts on how you can avoid some big problems down the line when planting trees in the ground. Hi there maple fans, and in this series of videos I'll be sharing what I do throughout an entire year on a monthly basis. Please note that these months are based on UK timings, but of course can easily be adapted to anywhere else in the world. So the first thing to consider when planting trees in the ground is the very ground you're planting them in, really. You can see this is a really boggy area. Much better to plant conifers down here. This arboretum hasn't planted a single maple in this area because they know that could cause terrible problems down the line. That basically the roots will rot if there's not enough drainage. So it's really worth considering the eventual size and shape of the trees, and this is a theme we'll come back to with many of these. This is a garnet, which is a very sort of slow growing rounded tree. Naturally it would be quite low to the ground though, so if we have a look sort of more inside the tree of what they've done, they've basically gone and staked it up so that the leader, as it were, the sort of the leading branch of the tree is sort of forced to grow upwards, and in that way you can actually increase the height of it and even though it's in the ground, you can sort of mold it to your own shape really. So it might suit you to keep these really low, so they don't sort of occupy too much vertical space. But in these instances, they can be modified, and this one's been done in the same way. You can clearly see the staking there, and that's made a real difference to the overall shape of the tree. So it's not just in pots we can sort of trim and modify, but we can certainly do a lot in the ground as well, to be honest with you. But I think the important lesson is to work with the right tree. These dissectums are slow growing, they're quite low growing. You're onto a good thing if you want to keep your plant small. So some of these trees have actually got their planting date on them. This is the Fireglow from 2015, so 9 years old, and you can see that I imagine it's planted at a similar time to the other dissectums, but a completely different proposition. It's very open structured though, so you can sort of see through it, so it's not sort of like a conifer where it's really dense. Beautiful tree to plant actually with the light coming through it. It's a shame it's not a sunnier day. But Fireglow is really excellent, and also to note as well when you're planting trees in the ground how well this has kept its red colour despite being in shade, and a lot of the red maples don't do that, so that's possibly another consideration. So this is Acer aureum, a very popular tree, similar age, but again if we look at it, you can see those wonderful Shiroswanum leaves. They're kind of very filled in the middle. They're sort of less palmatum like, but the completely different shape of tree. It's grown very much upwards in this classic upturned vase shape, and will in your garden take up a lot less space. It also leaves lots of opportunities with this kind of growth habit to kind of plant stuff around the base of it. Now the next tree in the ground here is one I have at home in a pot, and it's Yukon, and believe it or not that's again a very similar age, but he's far smaller. So some of these varieties are very slow growing, and that's a very careful choice too. It sounds really strange, but I definitely know of, I don't know, probably a dozen trees I can probably put in my garden, and even though it's a small urban garden, probably get away with it, but you just need to be really careful. It's a bit like buying conifers. Some of them get to absolutely vast, enormous heights. Some of them just don't. They're sort of dwarf really. So sort of going out and about, seeing the trees, researching is really important. So, you know, if you put them in a pot and leave them in a pot, you've got almost like a sort of semi-bonsai effect. You will keep all of these trees much smaller, but don't forget they will still grow in proportion to their normal growth rates. This is Siriu in the ground. I've stood under some of these at Westonbirt and other places in the UK. Really fast growing. Very different though. Another great point to note is because the top's been in the sun there, it's red like mine is if you've seen my other videos, but the rest of the tree certainly isn't. So location is everything. This tree will, as you can see, react very much to the light. So if you intend it to be green in full sunlight, it certainly won't. But obviously, conversely, if you want to put it in sunlight, you'll get a lovely red tree too. And just to say, if you'd like to come with me on my Acer journey, please do like and subscribe to my little channel. It really helps. I've also recently set up a Patreon site, so that's a great way of supporting me too, and help out with some of the costs of my excursions really. There's also the offer of some personal help if you'd like it, either in a group format or at a one-to-one basis. So while some of these trees might actually not grow that quickly, or to ultimately a very big size, the habit or the shape of the tree is also really important. So this is a seedling from a Sakazuki, so it's extremely like a Sakazuki really. And I've noticed in my other videos, and I've got one at home in a pot, it has this lovely kind of broad sprawling effect, which is absolutely great, but it's kind of almost wider than it is tall. So therefore, you just need some horizontal space, which we're often short of with a tree like this. Whereas other trees are much more vertical, and vertical space is usually much more easy to find, unless you're trying to grow these under the canopy of other trees above them, perhaps. It's interesting that this arboretum, which is Bluebell Arboretum in Ashby de la Zouch in the Midlands in the UK, is very new actually. There's lots of new plantings. Quite interesting that you can sort of see what they've done and kind of why they've done it. So this tree was planted in 2000 and it's growing at a sort of nice steady rate, to be honest with you. Again, there's an Acer behind it we can just about see, but they've given it some space around it because they do appreciate that it's going to grow. I've seen many people online actually. Sadly, they'll plant Acers very close together, having no real understanding of how big these things will get. They are full blown trees in the end, and they keep growing their entire life, to be honest with you, but they can get very, very tall indeed. So this is Kinchi, which is very similar to Koto no Ito. It's got this sort of little lace leaf, not quite as lacy as Koto actually, but the little lace leaf leaves. Lovely colour too, of course. It's autumn here in the UK, so we're really seeing the benefit of those. This is a good few years old actually, and it just doesn't get that big, and that's very common I find with these little lace leaf varieties. They grow quite quickly to start with, but they soon sort of calm down, they soon sort of slow down really. And a very, very manageable size. I've seen them in the UK 30 years old probably, and they're a bit bigger than this, but not dramatically so. So again, picking that right cultivar for the space you've got is really, really important. And there's still loads of choice actually available. If you don't want a blood good but you want red leaves, there's Fireglow, which is a little bit smaller, and other sort of dwarf varieties too, to be honest with you, that can be absolutely excellent, like Rhode Island Red. So this is Summer Gold, which is really worth highlighting because it has got a little bit burnt on the top. There's a few burnt leaves, but it is really rather sun tolerant, and it's quite yellow during the summer. So it has done well. Nice sort of steady grower, to be honest with you. It's very interesting as well. You can see that the effect of light on the leaves, because it has been in some sunshine, has really affected it. So we've got sort of more green leaves there as well that haven't changed colour as yet. But the ones that have had more sun are sort of a nice pinky colour, rather than sort of yellow ones perhaps on the top there. So very, very good tree, very heat tolerant, really good one to get hold of actually. And again, reasonable age on this tree as well, but hasn't done anything too dramatic, and is quite a manageable tree. Also, because it's yellow in the summer, it will sort of help make the green trees look great and the red trees look great, because that's exactly what yellow does. So this is an Acer I don't know, haven't really seen in the about really. But again, it's only 2018, it's about 6 years old, and it's getting a little bit of height on, to be honest with you. Definitely not a fast grower, but a sort of good medium grower. Some lovely leaves, upturned vase habit. And this is the beauty of going to these places. Again, you can see about how they have planted them, the spacing that's involved. And of course, you're not just planning for the autumn colours like this, gorgeous though they are. It's how it's going to look all year round, and mix and matching different trees. You don't want to land up with a load of red ones or a load of green. You just want to mix and match really. So this tree was unfortunately undated, but those tend to be on the earlier trees that have been planted. So as you can see, I'm looking at the branches, I'm looking at the overall tree. I think this is quite old actually. It's at least 10 years old, but it's a lovely, lovely compact size. So again, make the right choice. It's gone sideways, but overall it's still retained a kind of very controlled structure really. I say you can look at the branches there. There's obviously some weathering on them. They seem quite mature. Some lichen and stuff on it. So that's been around a little while, to be honest with you. But it does again show that correct cultivar choice is really, really important. So one of my little favourites now, I'm sure I've done this in another video, but Okushimo, lovely, interesting sort of curled up leaves. Very vertical growing. So this one often gets overlooked, I think. It's not the most spectacular sort of big broad leaf tree, but it's really delicate and interesting. But as you can see, a few years old, it's going sort of vertically upwards pretty much. So again, with that sort of almost columnar type upright shape, that could fit into a lot of gardens where others just won't really. So what about planting a tree in the ground like this and doing something really, really creative? So this is Rayusen, which is a sort of weeping variety. There are several. I've got Ruby Cascade, which is also lovely. Dragon Master as well is one of them. But as you can see, because it's gone up like this and it weeps, I've actually trained it over a kind of flat canopy. There's a wooden structure around it to sort of direct the growth really, and it's just sort of growing over there and hanging down in a really interesting way. So again, that's another way of planting something in the ground, retaining control over it, because at the end of the day, as it grows, pretty much they're just going to grow downwards, and you can just sort of trim it if they're on the ground really, and that's going to work exceedingly well. Never seen anything like this before, and it's really quite unique. So perhaps you have got a large property, a large premises, and you want something that's going to look fantastic. The two that would stand out for me are probably Bloodgood, because it gets some size on, as you can see really. It's a very old tree here, but the sort of final-ish size of this tree is pretty enormous. And probably Siriu as well, as a really, really fast grower. So those two, if you need the size, then that can be really, really useful. So in contrast here, we've got a tree that's sort of 9 years old. Beautiful orange fall colours, very, very nice indeed, but surprisingly small. So the genetics of these trees that control growth rate, as we can see, can vary absolutely enormously. Lovely compact round shape actually, so would work very, very nicely in a smaller garden perhaps, or it could sit very nicely underneath one of the larger trees and be perfectly happy as it is here. And this tree here is only 2018, that would be 6 years old I guess, or something like that. Lots of kind of staggered colour changes, but again, you know, a few years old, it's getting some growth on really. It's turned out to be a pretty decent tree. I'd probably say that's a good sort of 8-9 feet tall really. So as I always say, if in doubt, grow them in pots for a couple of years, put them in the ground when you get to know them, think ahead, put the right cultivar in the right location and leave them to do their thing.